The night was as deep as water. Emily Johnson, wrapped in a robe and wearing glasses, sat by the window, opening the documents she had received not long ago.
Serious, William Carter, the president of Carter Group, only 28 and already so successful.
She read attentively, completely unaware of the movement outside the window. By the time she heard the sound coming from the window, a tall, unfamiliar man had already landed in front of her.
Who are you? Why are you in my room?
She quickly took a step back, creating some distance between them, ready to call for help at any moment.
Do-me a favor.
Before she could react, the man's strong arms had already moved her from the window to the bed. She had no time to resist before she was pushed down, the masculine presence overwhelming her.
Let go!
Don't make a sound.
The man pressed his hand against her lips to silence her.
You.
The man removed her glasses. Without them, her eyes, usually hidden, now revealed their liveliness. His gaze deepened as he recognized her by the small, barely noticeable tear mole at the corner of her eye. Emily squinted deeply. She was nearsighted, and without her glasses, everything was a blur. She felt a surge of panic. What did this man want? Soon, her robe was removed. She was usually calm, but this situation was too sudden to handle. Just as they were at an impasse, the door to the room was suddenly kicked open, and several men in black barged in. The man's expression changed upon hearing the noise, and his lips moved to her neck.
Ah.
The man's body was hidden under the covers, his head buried in her neck, while her bare shoulders and arms were exposed, creating an incredibly suggestive scene. The men in black, embarrassed by the sight and sound, quickly closed the door and left. The man, however, made no further moves. After a while, once he was sure the guards wouldn't return, he got up and released her. Emily, breathing heavily, glared at him.
Pervert! Stay away from me!
The man narrowed his eyes in displeasure. He suddenly grabbed the back of Emily's head and kissed her forcefully. It wasn't until Emily was almost out of breath that he let her go, his dark eyes glinting with a deep light as he chuckled lowly.
We will meet again.
With that, he got up and left the room. The next day, Emily Johnson woke up with a throbbing headache, preparing to go sign a contract. She mentally cursed the man from last night. The production company valued this collaboration with the Carter Group highly, and she had to secure this investment. Emily Johnson arrived at the Carter Group an hour early. After preparing the contract, she sighed. She was just a manager, but now she was doing all sorts of tasks. As she was thinking, footsteps sounded outside the door. Emily Johnson turned her head and saw two figures walking towards her. She quickly stood up, ready to greet them. As they approached, she adjusted her glasses and looked up, seeing a very familiar face. The professional smile she had just put on instantly froze.
Miss Johnson, this is our CEO, William Carter.
How could it be him? This pervert was William Carter? William Carter watched her expression with great interest.
Hello, Mr. Carter. I am the representative for this negotiation, Emily Johnson.
William Carter silently repeated her name, raised an eyebrow, and sat down.
We meet again.
Emily Johnson's temples throbbed even more. He did it on purpose, didn't he? How was she supposed to respond to that?
Miss Johnson, do you know our CEO?
We've met once. I didn't expect Mr. Carter to remember me.
William Carter crossed his long legs and sat comfortably, saying meaningfully,
How could I not recognize you? We just met last night.
Emily Johnson caught the implication in his words and thought of their entanglement last night.
Mr. Carter, you have quite a sense of humor.
Secretary Adams sensed the subtle atmosphere between them and wisely offered.
Mr. Carter, I'll go get some drinks for you and Miss Johnson.
William Carter nodded, and for a moment, the office was left with just the two of them.
Mr. Carter, here's the contract for your review.
Emily Johnson proactively handed him the contract, hoping to ease the awkwardness between them through work, especially since he was the investor.
Will you be involved in this project?
Yes, I am the manager for the male lead of this project. The director is from our company.
William Carter took the contract, glanced at it, and beckoned her.
Come here.
Emily Johnson's temples throbbed again. He was the investor, she couldn't offend him. She obediently sat next to him, forcing a smile.
Is there any issue with the contract, Mr. Carter?
He signed the contract gracefully, handed a copy back to her, and leaned close, his breath warm against her ear.
No, you can go now.
Emily Johnson's heart skipped a beat. She took the signed contract and left. Although it was just a short signing, meeting William Carter made her feel as if a lifetime had passed. But fortunately, she had successfully completed the task. Emily Johnson happily held the contract and drove back to the company. Halfway there, her phone rang. It was Sarah Lee calling. As soon as she answered, Sarah Lee's urgent voice came through.
Jessica, you need to go to the hospital. My mom said your dad had a stroke and is in the hospital.
Emily Johnson couldn't help but grip her phone tightly.
I'll be there right away.
She hung up the phone and headed to the hospital without hesitation. When she entered the hospital room, Laura Johnson was feeding Robert Johnson porridge, spoonful by spoonful. Robert Johnson noticed her immediately and stopped eating.
Dad, how are you?
What are you doing here?
Emily's eyes showed a hint of sadness.
It's been so many years, Dad. Are you planning to never acknowledge me?
Laura Johnson put down the bowl, sighed with tears in her eyes. They were both her loved ones. How did things get this way? Hearing this, Robert angrily smashed the bowl of porridge.
Get out. I don't have a daughter like you.
Robert!
Don't plead for her.
Don't get upset, Dad. Your health is important.
She hadn't expected that after all this time, her father would still be so agitated.
You dared to run off with that scoundrel back then. My health? You don't care at all.
Dad, I was immature back then. It won't happen again.
Since that incident, she had valued her family above all else. Robert was taken aback. She had never been one to back down. This change made him both heartbroken and angry.
Don't give me that. Don't think I don't know. You haven't dated anyone because of that scoundrel. Tell me, what's so good about him?
Emily felt a deep bitterness. It wasn't for that person, she just couldn't muster the energy to love anyone else.
Don't be angry. The doctor said you shouldn't get too emotional.
Get out. Just looking at you makes me angry.
Laura also gave her a look, signaling her to leave for now. Emily had no choice but to close the door behind her. The heavy sighs of her parents echoed in her ears, and she felt a lump in her throat, almost bringing her to tears. Lost in her thoughts, she didn't notice someone following her, taking photos secretly. When she arrived at the company, Emily first went to the set to see the artist she was managing. When she got there, Michael Davis was taking a break, surrounded by several assistants. Emily watched quietly for a while, feeling a sense of pride as if watching her own child grow up. Michael was the only artist she had successfully promoted. She had managed others, but Michael was the one she had worked with the longest, from his entry into the industry to now. He came from a good family and worked hard, so his success was inevitable. Soon, Michael noticed her, left the crowd, and walked quickly towards her. All eyes turned to them.
You're finally back. I've been working really hard these past 2 days. How are you going to reward me?
His eyes filled with a warm smile that could make any fan swoon.
I wanted to treat you to a meal, but it's too troublesome to go out with you now.
Given Michael's current fame, he would be mobbed by fans the moment he stepped out of the car.
Being too popular is such a hassle.
Just as Emily was about to respond, an assistant ran over in a panic, holding up a phone and gasping for breath.
Emily, you're trending.
Me? How could a small-time agent like me make the headlines?
Michael Davis's expression also turned serious as he asked.
What's going on?
Emily immediately opened the news on her phone, and Michael leaned in to look.
Check the headlines.
Sure enough, the top trending topic was Emily Johnson's character. The headline read, "Popular star Michael Davis's agent has a strained relationship with her father, questionable character." There was even a photo of Robert Johnson lying in a hospital bed, angrily throwing things at her.
These reporters are unbelievable. They fabricated a scandal about me just to ride on your fame.
As she continued scrolling, the comments section was indeed in an uproar, mostly filled with Michael Davis's fans, all criticizing her. Loyal fan 123, if she can fall out with her own father, who knows how she'll treat Michael? Poor Michael. Michael's wife, someone like her doesn't deserve to be Michael's agent.
I'm sorry, it seems I've dragged you into this.
It's okay, it's my fault for being careless. I'll handle it quickly.
But Michael swiftly took out his phone, seemingly ready to record a video, muttering.
These reporters spreading lies so easily. I don't believe my fans will trust their nonsense over me.
Emily tried to stop him, but it was too late. She could only watch as he recorded and uploaded the video. She sighed, knowing this would definitely become another trending topic. The next morning, as Emily was heading to the set, she was surrounded by a group of girls.
Don't let her get away.
The crowd became agitated, and in the chaos, she was pushed hard, stumbling and falling to the ground. Smack! Something hit her head, and a foul-smelling liquid dripped down, blurring her glasses.
Shameless. Making Michael post a video to defend you. Are you seducing him? You wretch. How dare you try to seduce Michael? Why don't you just disappear?
More and more trash was thrown at her amidst the insults. Removing her smeared glasses, she struggled to stand and shield herself from the onslaught. Just then, a pair of steady hands helped her up. Michael Davis's fans were quickly held back and dispersed by a few bodyguards who had suddenly appeared. Emily Johnson turned her head, catching a glimpse of the man's chiseled jawline. She moved closer, squinting to see his face clearly.
Uncertain, Mr. Carter?
She couldn't believe her eyes. What was he doing here?
Cheerful, already forgotten me so soon?
Emily fumbled to clean her glasses, avoiding his question.
Friendly, I just think it's quite a coincidence to see you again, Mr. Carter.
Quite a coincidence indeed, William thought. He had come today to check on the progress of the show and to see her, but he hadn't expected to see her being cornered before even entering the set.
Patient, I came to check on the progress of the show.
Emily put on her glasses, and the world came into focus. She looked up, meeting William Carter's obsidian eyes. Even with her hair stuck together by rotten eggs, the mess was clearly reflected in his eyes.
Shy, I'll change my clothes and then show you around the set.
William assumed she was embarrassed. He took off his suit jacket and draped it over her, frowning.
Concerned, how did you end up like this?
Nervous, no need, Mr. Carter. I don't want to dirty your clothes. I'll just go change.
William's frown deepened. Without waiting for her response, he draped the jacket over her shoulders and held her close with his arm as they walked towards the set. The jacket had a faint scent of tobacco, which was surprisingly fresh and pleasant to Emily. She glanced up slightly and saw William's shirt unbuttoned at the collar, revealing his sexy collarbone, causing her heart to skip a beat. But the softness lasted only a moment. As soon as they entered the set, Director Smith hurriedly put down his work and came to greet them. Seeing this, Emily decisively pushed away from William.
Surprised. Emily, what's going on?
William wasn't angry at being pushed away. Instead, he cut off the director's questioning.
Serious, let her change her clothes first.
The director quickly agreed, casting a kind look at Emily, filled with admiration for her ability to handle William. Emily didn't care about the director's gaze and went to the set's bathroom to clean herself up and change clothes. After the director and William finished discussing the show's progress, she quietly told the director about the incident with Michael Davis's fans, expressing her desire to handle it quickly to avoid affecting Michael's other engagements. In front of William, the director naturally wouldn't disagree and cooperated by quickly preparing a press conference. Emily then made the necessary calls and drafted a sincere, non-offensive speech for Michael's press conference. Reporters were very enthusiastic about such matters and arrived early in the afternoon. Michael paused filming to attend the press conference. William just watched them busy themselves, taking a moment to step aside and make a phone call, his voice cold.
Serious, there's a press conference for the show I invested in. Make sure to keep an eye on it and don't let just anyone in.
As expected, the press conference went unbelievably smoothly from start to finish. Michael Davis performed reliably as always, and even the troublemaking reporters were surprisingly cooperative. Emily Johnson felt a wave of relief at her timely handling of the situation when Director Smith beside her praised her with a smile.
Great job, Emily. You handled everything perfectly.
Emily was about to respond when William Carter interrupted with a smile.
Miss Johnson, you are quite capable. I admire your skills. My company is facing a tricky case and needs someone skilled in crisis management. Director, could you make an exception and let Miss Johnson help us out?
Of course, Mr. Carter. You helped Emily out this morning, so I'm sure she wouldn't refuse.
Emily sighed inwardly. Crisis management was no small task, and she wasn't sure she could handle it. But William Carter had indeed helped her today, and she had no reason to refuse.
I'll help, Mr. Carter.
I'll be waiting for you at my company, Miss Johnson.
After he left, Director Smith cheerfully called it a day, and everyone returned to their respective places with mixed feelings. In the following days, the situation surrounding Emily Johnson gradually calmed down. Once the public opinion storm passed, she went to William Carter's company as promised. As soon as she entered the office, William Carter, sensing her presence, looked up from his computer.
Come here.
Emily's face inexplicably heated up. She walked over and stopped in front of him, all business.
Let's get straight to the case, Mr. Carter.
William Carter chuckled softly, standing up and leaning in close to look directly at her.
Otherwise, what do you want me to say?
The faint scent of tobacco invaded Emily's senses again. Perhaps because they were in the office, his jacket was casually draped over the chair, and his shirt was unbuttoned even more than last time. From this distance, she could see his Adam's apple moving, his exposed collarbone, and the faint outline of his chest muscles. Emily quickly averted her gaze but met his eyes again, deep and unfathomable, with a mysterious allure.
Is Mr. Carter like this with all women?
William Carter's eyes narrowed dangerously, his voice tinged with amusement.
Oh? Like what? Do you mean how I am with you now, or that night?
As he spoke, his fingers lightly traced her lips. Emily didn't dodge, instead showing a faint smile.
I misspoke. Mr. Carter can have any woman he wants. He wouldn't be interested in someone like me.
She didn't smile often, but when she did, it lit up her entire face, making her lips, which he had just touched, look even more enticing.
What if I am interested?
William Carter suddenly grabbed her hand, pulling her into his arms. Leaning in close, their noses almost touching, the intimate atmosphere was overwhelming. Emily tried to break free, nervously licking her lips.
Stop joking, Mr. Carter.
William Carter's eyes darkened instantly. How much more could he endure? He leaned in, pressing her against the desk, lightly biting her chin.
How about I repeat what happened that night? To prove whether I'm interested in you or not.
No, I misspoke. Please, Mr. Carter, let me go.
She pushed him hard, but he only pressed down on her more tightly. Just as he was about to make another move, there was a knock on the door, followed by Secretary Adams' respectful voice.
President, the documents have been delivered.
William Carter's temple throbbed violently. Emily took advantage of his momentary distraction to push him away. William straightened his clothes and barked.
Get out.
I'm sorry, President. I didn't mean to.
She hurriedly put down the documents and was about to leave. Emily, her face flushed, held her forehead.
This is just a misunderstanding. Don't overthink it, and definitely don't spread it around.
If you talk, you know the consequences.
Secretary Adams, frightened by his tone, nodded repeatedly and fled as if for her life. After this incident, Emily focused seriously on handling the case. The case was indeed significant, involving a major company trying to tarnish the reputation of Carter Enterprises. It took her nearly a week to find evidence of the other party's slander and turn the public opinion around. William then handed her the dirt on the other party, instructing her to expose it.
If he already had the dirt, why did he need me for crisis management?
But she didn't ask. After all, once this case was over, she wouldn't have to face William every day. Some things weren't worth knowing. To celebrate the resolution of the company's crisis, William took the staff out for karaoke in the evening. Naturally, he arranged for himself and Emily to share a private room. Who would have thought that as soon as he sat down, his imposing presence spread out, making it impossible for anyone else to enjoy themselves? Everyone in the room kept sneaking glances at the president and the new PR manager. After a while, Emily sighed and got up to go to the restroom.
If I don't leave, William will keep staring, and the others won't know whether to stay or go, likely resenting me for it.
As she was catching her breath in the hallway, she suddenly saw a few men angrily approaching her. Sensing trouble, Emily prepared to run, but they grabbed her and slammed her against the wall.
You're the one who helped Carter Enterprises with PR, right? Exposing our company's dirt. Today, you'll see what happens when you cross us.
The hallway lights kept flashing, and Emily saw that they were holding bottles. Her survival instinct kicked in, and she shouted,
Help!
But the music in the hallway was too loud, drowning out her cries.
No one can save you today, no matter how much you scream.
Fearing she might actually attract attention, he turned to his accomplices.
Hurry up, let's teach her a lesson today.
Seeing the menacing men raise their bottles to strike her, Emily's eyes reddened as she desperately shielded her head. Unexpectedly, the anticipated pain did not come.
William Carter, how dare you come here?
Emily Johnson's gaze followed the finely crafted men's leather shoes upward and saw William Carter's tall figure. He stood in front of her, exuding a chilling aura. He raised his arm and elbowed one person's abdomen, while the others clutched their wounds, glaring at him resentfully. Suddenly, one of them lunged forward, knocking William Carter aside. With no one shielding her, the others immediately grabbed bottles and charged at Emily Johnson. Seeing this, William Carter kicked away the person blocking him, but it was too late to retaliate. He could only turn and embrace Emily Johnson. Crash! The sound of the bottle shattering was sharp and piercing in the noisy corridor. Emily Johnson's heart felt like it was being squeezed, her eyes heating up.
William Carter!
She cupped his face, calling his name for the first time. William Carter slowly raised his eyes to look at her, his gaze slightly bloodshot, not speaking for a long time.
Are you okay? She reached out to touch the back of his head, her voice choked with emotion.
Her hand came away warm and wet with blood, and Emily Johnson nearly cried. Seeing William Carter injured, the men wanted to take advantage of the situation. Emily Johnson immediately stood in front of William Carter, her eyes red, and shouted at them.
Get out!
Her stance was one of defiance. The men were momentarily stunned by her aura and did not move. William Carter, looking at the frail figure shielding him, felt the pain dissipate a bit. This woman, so small and weak, was protecting him. Thinking of this, even in such a tense moment, he couldn't help but smile gently. Soon, security arrived and took away the troublemakers. The corridor was left with just the two of them. William Carter stepped forward and hugged Emily Johnson from behind, his head buried in her neck, his breathing heavy from the injury.
Are you okay? Let's go to the hospital.
William Carter looked at her intently, not answering her question.
What did you just call me? Say it again?
Emily Johnson was taken aback. She had called his name in a moment of urgency. Now, under his intense gaze, she felt awkward.
William Carter.
William Carter chuckled softly, his voice weaker than usual.
Sounds better than Mr. Carter.
He couldn't help but wince in pain.
Don't talk, she said, pressing on his wound, feeling the blood still flowing. You'll bleed more.
William Carter pulled her into his arms, his dizziness severe, his voice light.
As long as you're okay.
Don't move. She tried to pull away, but he held her tighter with surprising strength. She didn't dare move, afraid of hurting him, so she stayed still.
Eventually, someone from his company saw them and quickly called a doctor. William Carter rarely went out before the bandages on his head were removed, and Emily Johnson took on the responsibility of caring for him since he was injured, saving her. One day, the filming wrapped up early, and Emily Johnson went to change William Carter's bandages. She had been coming frequently these days, and the servants at William Carter's house would open the door for her without hesitation. Entering, she saw William Carter sitting on the living room sofa, working on his computer. Noticing her arrival, he naturally patted the seat beside him.
Come sit.
Emily Johnson sat next to him, waiting for him to finish his work before asking curiously.
Aren't you bored staying in all these days?
In another part of town, William Carter adjusted the bandage on his head, looking a bit helpless.
Stuffy, but if I don't keep this on, I can't go out.
While applying medicine to him, Emily Johnson teased him.
Why don't you just wear a helmet when you go out?
An idea flashed through William Carter's mind. He pulled Emily Johnson to the garage.
You can ride a motorcycle?
Yeah, if I ride this, no one will see the bandage on my head.
William handed her a helmet and motioned for her to come over. Emily stood in front of him, watching as he carefully helped her put on the helmet. Because they were going to ride, both had changed into motorcycle gear. William stood tall and handsome, looking both cool and alluring. After a moment, Emily picked up another helmet to put on him. Due to the height difference, she had to stand on tiptoe to reach his head. William smiled silently, wrapped his arms around her waist, and bent down slightly to make it easier for her. The motorcycle was designed for two people. William pushed it out, swung his long leg over, and then lifted the visor of his helmet, turning to Emily.
Get on!
Emily looked at him and the motorcycle with a complicated expression before getting on and wrapping her arms around his strong waist. William twisted the throttle, and they sped off. Several times on the road, the bike wobbled, and Emily had to hold him tightly. Feeling her closeness, William's lips curled up slightly, a hint of satisfaction in his expression. Halfway through, William pulled over and turned to Emily.
You drive.
How did you know I could ride this?
I guess.
Worried about his injury, Emily didn't ask further and switched places with him. William, now behind her, wrapped his arms around her, his hands covering hers on the handlebars.
What are you doing?
I'm injured, don't move.
Emily stopped moving. With his hands guiding hers, she twisted the throttle and started the motorcycle. It had been a long time since she had ridden, and she was a bit unsteady at first. But soon, familiarity took over, and she rode smoothly. The wind roared, blowing against the two of them as they leaned close on the bike. William turned his head, feeling that this was when Emily was most free.
Emily, don't leave me.
What did you say?
The wind was too loud, and his words were lost in it. She only caught the tail end of his sentence. William fell silent, not answering her. They stopped by a bridge, leaning against the motorcycle and feeling the breeze from the river.
This feeling reminds me of my school days.
Were you very different in school?
It doesn't matter anymore.
The people you met, do they not matter either?
Let's go back.
It wasn't that the past didn't matter, but it was too heavy for her to bring up again. Peace lasted until the wrap party for the film. It was then that Emily Johnson saw William Carter. William Carter walked into the private room, and those inside immediately pulled him over for a chat.
Oh, Mr. Carter, we never see you unless the film wraps up.
Yes, Mr. Carter, you must have a few drinks with us.
It's rare for Mr. Carter to join us. You must drink more.
The previously spacious private room instantly became lively. William Carter maintained a faint smile, but his gaze was locked on Emily Johnson in the corner. Soon, the room was filled with drinking. William Carter, although capable of holding his liquor, chose to sit quietly in the corner to avoid looking at a certain someone. He randomly pointed and said in a deep voice,
Let them join us.
Those around him, quick to understand, immediately included everyone else. Emily Johnson was pushed to sit beside him. William Carter glanced at her with a heavy gaze and continued drinking. After several rounds, the room became chaotic. No one bothered William Carter anymore, but Emily Johnson was forced to drink. Feeling tired from the day's work, the alcohol hit her hard, and she struggled to stay awake, resting her head on her hand. Later, as people left one by one, Emily Johnson opened her eyes, her vision blurry. Instinctively, she reached out for her glasses but touched a warm, solid chest instead.
Awake?
Emily Johnson withdrew her hand, squinting to find her glasses but couldn't locate them.
Where are my glasses?
William Carter helped her up.
I'll take you out.
He had kept her glasses in his coat pocket. Unable to resist, Emily Johnson was led out by him. Though she couldn't see clearly, holding William Carter's hand made her feel secure. The car arrived at her home, but the sight that greeted her at the door left Emily Johnson stunned. The small house was flooded, with water reaching the tips of her shoes, and all the appliances were soaked. Her home had a leak. William Carter stepped inside, took one look, and frowned.
You can't stay here for now. Come stay with me.
Emily Johnson moved slightly, the alcohol making her dizzy. She stumbled a few steps. William Carter scooped her up and said in a deep voice,
We're going home.
Emily Johnson looked at him for a moment, her eyelids heavy, and fell asleep in his arms. William Carter carried her all the way to the bedroom. She hadn't woken up, her hands tightly wrapped around his neck. He had no choice but to lie down, remove her glasses, and try to release her grip. Emily Johnson stirred, wrapping her limbs around him, curling up in his arms. William Carter gently patted her back, lifted her chin, and raised her face. Her cheeks were flushed, and her eyelashes fluttered lightly. Asleep, Emily Johnson looked much cuter than usual. William Carter kissed the corner of her lips, causing her to murmur softly, blink in confusion, and kiss his chin.
Thomas Wright.
William Carter's expression turned cold. The name Thomas Wright sounded familiar. It seemed like a man's name, someone she liked. So, in her heart, did he really hold no place at all? For the first time, William Carter felt a sense of defeat.
I've known Emily Johnson for many years, back when I was still in college. Originally, we had no connection, but one day.
William decided to take a quiet moment in an alley before heading back. A few students from the neighboring school noticed him and surrounded him, grinning.
Hey, you look like you're from the school next door. Alone, huh?
William, expressionless, tried to walk past them, but they persistently blocked his way.
Where are you going? We're from brother schools. Shouldn't you give us a gift or something? That phone you're holding looks pretty nice, custom made, right?
William, who had grown up in a business family, looked down on them. They were just some naive kids, not worth his time. Seeing his indifferent attitude, the students got angry and tried to snatch his phone. At that moment, a girl rushed over, standing beside him with a commanding presence.
Why are you doing this again? Do you want Thomas Wright to clean up your mess?
William signaled his bodyguards outside not to intervene and carefully observed the girl beside him.
I'm telling you, if you bully him today, I'll have Thomas Wright beat you up when we get back.
Not long after hearing this, the students left in a hurry. At that time, William didn't know the girl's name, but he remembered her face. When she turned to him, her eyes, marked by a tear mole, were particularly lively.
It's okay now, don't be scared.
William found it amusing but kept his face expressionless, not even saying thank you, just watching her leave. After that, he couldn't help but pay attention to her. He found out she was also from the neighboring school and even knew which classes she would skip and when she would appear near his school. One day, he couldn't resist asking his bodyguards to find out more about her and learned that she had a boyfriend. William felt a bit down when he returned home that day. Fortunately, the process of getting to know that girl was a simple story.
William, our family talked with the Lin family today. After you graduate, you'll be engaged to Samantha Brown from the Lin family. What do you think?
Oh.
William stared at the cold floor, responding casually. The doorbell rang outside. Emily Johnson walked past him to open the door, and a refined, elegant middle-aged woman stood there, looking surprised to see her.
Who are you?
Emily was also taken aback. This woman's demeanor bore some resemblance to William Carter. Seeing her silence, the woman stepped inside and called out.
William, the people at the company said you didn't go in today, so I came here to find you.
Emily closed the door and followed her in, seeing William with the same surprised expression.
Mom, what are you doing here?
William's mother? Emily couldn't help but take a few more glances. No wonder her demeanor was so similar to William's.
Who is she? Why did you bring a woman home so casually?
William glanced at Emily but didn't answer his mother's question.
Did you come here alone?
The driver is waiting outside. I came to talk to you about something.
William looked at Emily again, signaling with his eyes for her to return to her room.
Wait a minute. Not just anyone can stay at our William's place. What's your relationship with him?
Ma'am, Mr. Carter is just temporarily sheltering me. There's nothing more to it.
Mrs. Carter, somewhat satisfied with her attitude, nodded and then turned to William.
When are you going to visit the old house? Your father and grandfather have been thinking about you.
I'll go back in a while.
Emily had already returned to her room, giving them enough space to talk, but she could still hear their conversation.
William, it's not about your taste, but you have a fiancé. Don't get involved with unclear women.
Mom, she's not an unclear woman. I'll handle it.
Handle it? Bringing her home is handling it? What about Samantha?
Emily stayed in her room, no longer listening to the conversation outside. When the voices outside ceased, Emily walked out and saw William sitting on the sofa, holding his head.
I should go.
Go?
Yes, I can't stay at your place anymore.
His mother had been here, how could she stay any longer? William saw through her thoughts immediately.
Is it because my mom came today?
Your mom doesn't seem to want me here.
William rubbed his temples and didn't stop her. Emily Johnson left William Carter's house and returned to her rented apartment. All the broken appliances had been replaced with new ones.
Maybe he does care about me, she whispered, feeling a mix of emotions.
The next day, at the filming location, William Carter didn't show up again. Emily headed straight home. The streets were crowded, so she got off the bus early and walked. Suddenly, someone whispered in her ear.
Be careful, someone's following you.
She froze and looked around but saw only the bustling crowd.
She heard a motorcycle starting nearby.
Thomas Wright! She ran, tears streaming down her face. But there was only the crowd.
She searched aimlessly before heading back. Suddenly, she was pulled into a car and lost consciousness. When she woke up, she was in a warehouse. Samantha Brown was there, leaning against a shelf.
Awake already? She glanced at Emily and smiled.
Did you kidnap me because of William Carter?
You guessed part of it. I kidnapped you because of William.
You care about him?
Of course not. I just want to torment him using you.
Samantha glanced at the door, smiling.
Look, here he comes.
William Carter entered, his figure unmistakable. Emily felt warmth flooding her eyes. William saw Emily tied up, her face streaked with tears, and his temples throbbed with anger.
Let her go.
Samantha Brown looked at him coldly.
Tell your men to leave, or I can't guarantee her safety.
He black-clad men responded by holding Emily Johnson, ready to act at any moment. William Carter's eyes narrowed slightly, his lips pressed into a hard line.
Get out.
The men exchanged glances and then quickly exited. Samantha Brown smiled with satisfaction.
You're truly devoted, aren't you?
Eliam ignored her, turning to Emily Johnson, his voice softening.
Are you okay?
Emily Johnson shook her head, looking at him with worry and tension.
I'm fine. Samantha Brown is targeting you. Be careful.
Is there any point in saying that now?
Eliam looked at her coldly.
If you have a problem, come at me.
Amantha's expression was equally stern.
Of course, it's about you. If I could, I'd want your entire family to pay for what happened to the one I loved.
William's eyes flickered for a moment before he spoke.
This has nothing to do with Emily. Let her go.
You didn't spare Michael, so why should I spare her?
Eliam rubbed his temples, his voice carrying a hint of sternness.
It was an accident, unrelated to my family. But if you harm her, I won't let you go.
The pain of losing Michael was still deeply etched in her heart. Samantha spoke sorrowfully.
If your family hadn't insisted on our engagement, Michael wouldn't have left the country heartbroken, wouldn't have had that plane crash.
That was his own choice. You can't blame my family entirely. Over the years, I've given you everything you wanted.
Can you bring Michael back? It's your family's fault. If Michael can't live, you won't be happy with her either.
Calm down, Samantha. Emily hasn't done anything. Don't hurt her.
Samantha's gaze swept over them, filled with resentment.
Because of you, I won't let her go.
She signaled to the black-clad men beside Emily.
Do it.
The men hesitated for a moment, struggling with the idea of harming a woman. But under Samantha's urging, they reluctantly prepared to act. Before they could touch Emily, William's strong hand restrained them. Though outnumbered, he quickly subdued one and kicked another, engaging in a fierce struggle.
William Carter, if you fight back again, for every move you make, she'll get hurt.
William and the black-clad men froze. One of the men held a knife, its blade glinting coldly, aimed at Emily.
Don't listen to her. Call your men in. Don't worry about me.
Samantha coldly pulled out a gun, aiming it at Emily.
If you say another word, I'll make sure you two are separated forever.
A gun? William's pupils contracted sharply. He agreed to her demand.
Fine, I won't fight back.
Tell your men to leave.
You all leave! This has nothing to do with you anymore.
Samantha watched as the men outside dispersed, nodding in satisfaction.
Good.
She then ordered the black-clad men.
What are you waiting for? Do it.
Two men immediately restrained William, while another kicked him in the abdomen. William doubled over in pain, gritting his teeth to endure it. The men took turns kicking him, venting their anger, while William remained hunched over, numb to the pain.
Millie's heart ached as she watched.
Fight back. Don't let them keep hitting you.
William ignored her pleas. Samantha, still unsatisfied, said to the men.
Don't you know how to use a knife?
Slap. A loud slap landed on his face as Emily, breathing heavily, glared at him.
Pervert! Stay away from me!
The man narrowed his eyes in displeasure. He suddenly grabbed the back of Emily's head and kissed her forcefully. It wasn't until Emily was almost out of breath that he let her go.
We will meet again.
With that, he got up and left the room. Thomas was notorious for causing trouble at school, often leading fights with students from other schools. After each confrontation, he would drape his jacket over his shoulder and walk indifferently through a crowd of admiring eyes, exuding a maturity and mystery beyond his years, which made many girls infatuated with him. Emily Johnson met Thomas on the rooftop of the school building. She had gone up to study, only to find Thomas smoking there.
Want one?
Thomas offered her a cigarette. Emily was momentarily stunned, silently noting his piercing gaze despite his youthful face.
You're quite famous at our school.
Thomas merely responded with a nonchalant not engaging further. Emily, not being naturally outgoing, spent the entire afternoon quietly studying beside him. As she was leaving, she tripped on the stairs, and Thomas caught her.
Be careful.
So, you're not that cold after all.
Thomas heard her clearly and chuckled.
I'm not cold to my girlfriend.
Whoever becomes your girlfriend must be very happy.
Yeah, you could give it a try.
Really?
Thomas laughed and flicked her forehead.
Just kidding.
After that, Emily began to appear frequently in front of Thomas, always managing to get past his numerous admirers to reach him first. Until one day, Thomas looked at her with disdain.
You're not my type.
What type do you like?
I like cool girls.
Emily began to note Thomas's preferences. He liked cool girls, so she cut her hair short. He smoked, so she learned to smoke, even though it made her eyes water. His favorite thing was riding motorcycles at high speed, so she saved up for over a month to buy a motorcycle. Despite getting injured while learning to ride, she persevered, thinking of Thomas's face. When she appeared in front of Thomas again with short hair and a motorcycle, Thomas looked at her with a complicated expression.
Focus on your studies.
What's the point of studying hard if I can't win you over?
Back then, she had the courage to speak her mind so freely. Later, Thomas started taking her along for motorcycle rides. His friends would always pair them up. Emily, determined not to embarrass him, honed her riding skills to perfection. A month before the end of the semester, they got together. That night was dark, and Thomas walked her to the dormitory.
Do you still want to be my girlfriend?
Their relationship lasted until a year before Thomas graduated. He was expelled for fighting, and his family wanted to move him out of the city. Emily, still in school, insisted on going with him despite her unfinished studies. Her parents were extremely worried. After a fierce argument with her father, they tried everything to keep her locked at home. Emily was locked up for several days before she finally pried open a window and jumped from the low floor of her house. Her legs went numb upon landing, but she ignored it and rode her motorcycle to Thomas's house. A rebellious boy like Thomas had no hesitation in running away with her. It was a crazy decision. They didn't care how their families searched for them, they just kept riding forward on their motorcycles. It took them a whole day to stop traveling, finding an abandoned warehouse to stay in. They had no money, and even the bedding they slept on was scavenged from others.
Finding work is harder than I thought.
We could set up a makeshift stove and live on plain boiled noodles for a while.
They lived on plain boiled noodles for over a month. Even after that, their situation didn't improve much, as their wages were meager. During those days, Thomas gradually shed his youthful arrogance and became much more mature.
Thomas, why don't you ever touch me?
I don't want to take advantage of you. It would be irresponsible of me. I'm a man, and I can't let my woman live such a life.
Not long after, Thomas disappeared one morning, along with his motorcycle. Emily chased after him and found out he was getting married.
Thomas? Getting married?
On the wedding day, she saw Thomas through the large fountain outside the hotel, her vision blurred. She watched from a distance, taking in the names of the bride and groom at the hotel entrance and the congratulatory flower baskets.
If only it were me.
Thomas, in a white suit, looked mature and striking. The bride had a shy smile. The fountain's water splashed onto Emily's motorcycle jacket as she wiped away the droplets, turned around, and rode off.
Goodbye, Thomas.
She never saw Thomas again and gave up her motorcycle, leaving only memories etched deeply in her bones. She picked up her studies, becoming the studious, obedient girl that Thomas disliked the most. The memory abruptly ended, and in front of her was still Thomas's face, looking deeply at her.
Didn't I tell you someone was following you? What would you have done if I hadn't come?
Why are you here?
I wanted to see you secretly, but then I noticed someone was following you. What have you done to yourself all these years?
I'm fine.
Is he treating you well?
Thinking of William Carter, her face softened a bit. She nodded lightly and hesitated before asking.
Didn't you get married? How are things with your wife?
We're divorced.
Compromising with his family to get married might have been his life's regret, but he didn't regret it.
I'm going to see William Carter.
Go ahead.
He passed by her and called his men to leave. He had abandoned her once and could never hold her hand again. Over the years, they had both changed. When Emily arrived at the hospital, the Carter family was already there, blocking her at the door of the private room. She saw William lying inside, her heart in her throat, not knowing his condition.
If anything happens to William, the Carter family will not let you off.
Grandfather, please.
She was interrupted.
Don't call me that. After what you did to Zemiao, I can't bear to hear it.
Dad, don't get yourself worked up, casting a resentful glance at Emily Johnson.
Emily Johnson stood helplessly at the door, unable to enter. The Carter family had someone watching over the situation, so she waited at the door until the doctor said William Carter's condition had improved before she left. When William Carter was discharged from the hospital, Emily Johnson went to the hospital entrance and saw Mr. Carter and his mother accompanying him out.
They wouldn't let you see me?
So I had to wait until you got better to come see you.
William Carter chuckled softly and took her hand.
Let's go home so you can see me as much as you want. You just got better, and you want to linger at the hospital entrance? Grandpa, I'm calling off the engagement with Samantha Brown.
Mr. Carter looked at them coldly.
Even if it's called off, this woman will never be allowed into the Carter family. Look at what you've done for her.
Samantha was the one who planned the kidnapping. Why blame her?
I can forgive her, as long as she leaves you.
It's not that she won't leave me, it's that I won't leave her.
Mr. Carter glared at him in frustration.
You can have any woman you want. Why her?
She's different. I hope you can accept her too.
When the Carter family really needs something, you'll regret this.
Mr. Carter gave them a heavy look before getting into his car, with Mrs. Carter following after a complicated glance at them.
You don't have to go against your grandfather for me. Family is always family. I've already had a falling out with my dad and don't want you to go through the same.
Let's go home.
When they arrived at William Carter's house, Emily Johnson was still a bit in shock. William Carter had actually had her things moved over.
Why did you bring my things here?
Of course, to live with me. Do you want to keep living in that leaky little apartment?
living together so soon? Emily Johnson felt a bit uneasy.
I'm fine where I am.
But I want to give you a home.
A home?
Since graduating, she had lived alone and lost the concept of home. Hearing him say it now gave her a warm feeling.
Yes, stay here. Gently kissing her forehead.
That night, Emily Johnson still felt a bit dazed. Was she really going to live here with William Carter? It felt almost too good to be true.
It's late. Go take a shower.
Okay.
She walked into William Carter's usual bathroom. William Carter chuckled and followed her in.
Why are you coming in?
To shower.
Emily Johnson felt a bit flustered. It was her first time being in a bathroom with a man. His muscular chest was exposed, marked with several scars from the day she was kidnapped.
You should go out first.
After William Carter took off his shirt, he went to fill the bathtub. A thin layer of steam began to rise in the bathroom, creating an ambiguous atmosphere. Suddenly, Emily Johnson was pulled towards him, standing face to face. The bathroom was spacious, yet she inexplicably felt it was cramped.
Relax, Emily.
William Carter's lips curved into a smile as he effortlessly lifted her into the bathtub, his deep gaze never leaving her. The bath was particularly challenging. Once in the bedroom, he placed Emily Johnson on the bed, leaning over her, his breath hot against her ear. A night of passion ensued. During the time Emily Johnson stayed at William Carter's house, she didn't neglect her work. Michael Davis had already arranged for an assistant to take care of her, so she didn't have to face him anymore. Her work location was changed to the company, and she no longer had to go to the film set. This lighter workload made her quite lazy, often feeling more tired than when she was running around the set. William Carter mentioned that Samantha Brown's issue was also being handled. The Lin family had considerable influence, making it difficult to deal with her quickly. After work, Emily Johnson left the company and followed the crowd towards the subway station. After taking a few steps, she saw William Carter standing across the street, leaning against his car. When he saw her looking over, he straightened up. Her phone rang at that moment. It was William Carter calling from across the street.
Why didn't you wait for me at home?
Come over here. I'll take you to dinner.
Wait a moment, there are too many cars right now.
All right, I have something to tell you.
Emily Johnson looked up, gazing at him through the flowing traffic. The distance of one street, not too close, not too far, made her curious about what he wanted to say.
Go ahead.
I know Thomas Wright is back, but you haven't gone to see him.
It's over between us.
So, do you want to cross this street and come to me?
What if we always end up standing on different sides of the road?
I think, even if we're on different roads, there's nothing we can't overcome, Emily. Will you walk the future path with me?
Emily Johnson looked at him steadily, feeling a surge of emotion.
I don't know if we can have a future.
I've never said this to you before. I thought you would understand, but are you still hesitating? Don't close yourself off. Remember, no matter what happens, I'll face it with you. So, trust me.
Why me, William?
Her eyes were slightly teary. He stood across the street, dressed in a suit, his shirt unbuttoned, exuding his usual charm, so perfect it was almost untouchable.
The traffic is lighter now. Are you coming over, or should I go to you?
She paused for a moment, then exhaled. She had always been avoiding his feelings. If she could be brave just once, she didn't want to let go this time.
I'll come over.
She looked at William Carter across the street. He seemed to be smiling, though it was hard to see clearly. With the traffic easing, she finally took a step, then another, until she was in front of him. She held William Carter's hand tightly, not letting go. William Carter and Emily Johnson's wedding took several months to prepare, including getting their families to accept her. However, since Emily Johnson found out she was expecting, things became much easier. It was a grand and lengthy wedding. Under the witness of the priest, they went through the entire ceremony. He knew that this woman finally and completely belonged to him,